And you mentioned briefly about how barristers would encounter disasters. I wonder if you have particular memories of how you assist when barristers cop out.
I mean, it depends on the situation, because sometimes it's relationships. Barrister just does not get on with the solicitor. Solicitor wants to take a load of bad points because the client wants to take a load of bad points, and perhaps the solicitor won't tell the client. Rather, the client the solicitor cops out and lets the barrister deal with it, and that causes friction. You then got a barrister who is critical of the instructing solicitor's team, thinks that the junior solicitor on the case or whatever is just not up to the job. So, David, this is ridiculous. You've got to do something about it. That's me. And what can I do about it? And I did try once to do something about it, and that was 30 odd years ago. And I spoke to the solicitor about one member of the team, and I learned very, very quickly, and never made that mistake again, that the solicitor would immediately and quite rightly protect his team. And it's the same the other way with the bar. You learn by your mistakes to say, Mr. XQC doesn't think that your number two is up to it. And sorry, but the main woman on the case would immediately protect the number two. And be quite honest now, as a clerk, you cop out of that. If a member of Chambers has got an issue, then that's really for the senior solicitor on the case with the barrister concerned, then they should go and have a drink and sort it out between them. Don't put me in the middle. And there's been a number of situations over the years where senior member of Chambers is complaining about a junior member of Chambers and said, this person just hasn't done the work, hasn't dug deep enough, hasn't looked at it so hard because there's these cases there that this person never found, and this is unacceptable because how can I trust the work if I don't think the research has been done? David, you've got to go and talk to them. And I said, it's not my job. And of course, they cop out because they find it too difficult to have that conversation. But I said, look, if you've got a problem with that junior member of Chambers, you go and deal with it yourself. Because if I go and deal with it, they're going to not know the whys, the what fors, and everything else. And I haven't got the answers to those questions because I'm not the person who's found the problem. And so I say to the senior members of Chambers, and often some of these members of Chambers were their pupils. So, you've built up that relationship. And if someone is not doing the job properly, you need to take them on the one side and help them because they need to learn. I can deal with many situations, but it's not for me to guide them legally. If they're not doing it right, the senior barrister should direct them. And then you've got, it's often situations where cases don't go well. Cases don't go well because the client has been found to be lying or haven't disclosed a document. And that's just when cases go bad. We did a lot of shipping cases, and a lot of the shipping cases, there were scuttling cases where the master gives the order for the ship to be sunk, and then the owners then claim on the insurance. And we did a lot of cases like that. And day before trial, suddenly, amazingly, this telex is found where the master has said, pull the plug. And the case has to settle. But that's no fault of the barrister. It's certainly no fault of the instructing solicitor. But then a lot of what I had to deal with was just relationships, where maybe the member of Chambers wasn't putting all his effort into the case, was doing 6 other things at the same time, and that was easily found out. So I had to be the interface between the solicitor in many a situation like that. But you also know in a set of Chambers, the members of Chambers you're going to have this issue with. You're fully aware of it before it happens. You head that off at the pass, even before the solicitor has said, I've paid this person all this money, and why is he not working 100% on my case? Why is he in court on this? Why is he in court on that? So you can see that all coming down the road. So you can get there before the solicitors got there.
What about on the flip side? I mean, having worked with so many barristers, are you able to identify when someone has that star quality and they might be ready to take the silk? Do you plan for that as well?
Yeah, that's a double act. That is the barrister and the clerk talking about it. I could raise it. The barrister could raise it. The barrister could raise it, and I'd say it's too early. It's not right. There was a time in my career, and probably it was back in the 80s when I'd been at Essex Court for maybe the first 15 years. I don't know. Maybe where the process changed, but you had a feeling that that member of Chambers was sort of right for silk. I don't know what it was. I just had a feeling that she had got to that level where you thought that he had that or she had that sort of star quality type of work, what people were saying about them. So when I clerked someone called John Thomas, he eventually became Lord Chief Justice of England and Wales, Lord Thomas. And I remember him in 1982/3 talking to him about his silk application. The form wasn't a very big form in those days, but some difficult questions. And I remember going to see Anthony Evans, who was the head of Chambers, who then became Lord Justice Evans and also Chief Justice of the Dubai International Financial Centre. And I remember going to talk to him saying, John wants to apply for silk and there are these questions and can we just sort of help us on the answers? Because he hadn't gone to the bench at that point, but he was in silk, he'd seen the form, he knew and I used to keep the forms. Years after that, people would want to apply. I knew the sort of pro forma. I had my sort of model of what other people had said without saying John Thomas said this or whatever. I had it. And don't get me wrong, in those days, it was always Mr. So Mr. Thomas, Mr. Evans, it was never Christian names in those days, not even me as senior clerk. That only changed in the early 2000s. But you had a hunch. And in those days, you applied and you got it. And there would be 25 or 30 people on the list. You'd go down to the House of Lords, they'd get sworn in. And it was much more of a sort of family occasion because the wife, husband, the kids, the mums and dads all turned up. You went down in a Daimler to the House of Lords. The clerk, so the silk, wears the full bottom wig and all the regalia. And the clerk wears morning suit, striped trousers, tails. White. The silk has white gloves. The clerk didn't have white gloves in my day. But it was a big moment when someone took silk, a proud moment. As a silk is like starting all over again because you're competing with all those other people that have just taken silk or those people who are young in silk. And it's a bit unkind, but I used to say, when you've just got silk, you're not a real silk. I used to say a rayon. You didn't become a real silk until you'd been going for 10 years. You'd made your name because progressively there are more and more and more silks. It was like cream rises to the top. And eventually, well, I sort of perceived as one of the starred silks. And, you know, I was lucky in the set that I had that those that took silk have risen to the top. I've had many, many, many silks, many, many, many judges, not only to the English High Court, to the Court of Appeal, to the House of Lords, as it was then, now the Supreme Court, but also to the International Court of Justice and to the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Never achieved Luxembourg, never got anybody onto the bench in Luxembourg, but I had two judges to the International Court of Justice, Dame Rosalind Higgins and Sir Christopher Greenwood, and Judge Tim Micah to the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. So Chambers has done well. And you have these people, I see these people as juniors, as pupils. And I remember I went to Strasbourg when Tim was sworn in as the UK judge in Strasbourg. I knew him as a pupil. It's a very personal relationships one has with these people. They're not just clerk, barrister. You've grown up with them. It's a team effort. And as they join the bench in Strasbourg, you almost have to say, it's like dad saying goodbye. It's they're no longer in my charge. Or the High Court bench, I go to swearing in those early days, used to go and see the Lord Chancellor. Me, the new judge, the family, we would go to the Lord Chancellor's private room. It was very, very personal and a massive, incredibly proud to see these people. And I've always made a point of keeping in touch with my judges as they've gone onto the bench. I go and have tea with them. How's it going? What are the cases? Any feedback on my members of Chambers when they appear in front of you? And then talk about when they go onto the Court of Appeal, maybe to the Supreme Court. I'd go to the International Court of Justice and go and see Sir Christopher Greenwood and understand what work they're doing.
Who you say were the people that influenced you the most in your career?
The first influence was Richard Yorke. He had the aeroplane. That didn't matter so much. He had an Aston Martin. He had a Rolls Royce. None of that really mattered, and it didn't The aeroplane impressed me, but the other things didn't really. Though I did used to use his Aston Martin. I had the keys to that as well. But it was his outlook on life. He's sort of commercial. He saw the future of the bar. And at the time, I didn't know, but it was rubbing off. There is a silk at the English bar called Stuart Isaacs. He appears a lot in Singapore. He was Richard's pupil, and we often talk about Richard. The other person was when I joined Essex Court. He was a fantastic administrator, and I learned so much from him because a lot of what I had to do, I didn't really know much about it. But John was a great teacher and all of that. We were the first set of chambers to have a computer. We were the first set of chambers to form a management company. So the staff were employed by the management company rather than the head of chambers. We were the first set of chambers to have a brochure. Eventually, I mean, the Bar Council used to come up with ideas, and I would think, I thought about that 5 years ago. This is not new. So John and Richard York were of great influence. Gordon Pollock, head of chambers for 20 years, a tough man. But I learned a lot from him. But equally, I was privileged in the 90s to clerk Sir Michael Carr, who'd left the Court of Appeal. Lord Mustall, when he retired from the House of Lords and came back to Chambers, and I learned a lot from Michael Mustall. You know, one was learning from people like that. When I was a junior clerk, it was Richard York. And when I started in Chambers, it was John. In the Chambers I spent 3 years in Lincoln's Inn, there was no standout person there. But Chambers as a whole, they were being in a commercial stroke planning set and joining a set that did trust, wills, property. It was really different life, very slow, very frustrating for me. Members of Chambers weren't very quick. They take months to do an opinion. I learned about patience. I learned about diplomacy. And in fact, one of the people that commented on the Times article, how to deal with cantankerous old people. But it was a fantastic learning for me in that 3 years, because when I eventually ended up at 4 Essex Court, that I'd had a real grounding in some of the things which were so important for the next 40 years.
Wasn't 4 Essex Court a place you always wanted to join?
It wasn't a place I always wanted to join. My senior clerk, Leslie Page, said when I was a junior clerk that the best set of chambers in the land was 4 Essex Court. It was the set that everybody looked up to. And I thought to myself, if I'm ever going to get to a set like that, not necessarily 4 Essex Court, I need to have a grounding as a senior clerk somewhere else. So a job came up at 17 Old Buildings in 1976. I'd been in the job, 5 years? And I thought, well, I'm going to go for this because if I want to progress in my career, this will be a good school to learn the craft of a senior clerk, not a sort of high-flying commercial set. So I joined 17 Old Buildings in February 1977, and I was 23. Amazingly, the job at 4 Essex Court came up. I didn't suddenly rush off an application. I went back to Gray's Inn Chambers. I sat with my senior clerk, Leslie Page, and I sat with Richard York and said, what do you think? And they said, David, go for it. And I went for it. And the first interview, I think, was an absolute disaster. I thought, well, that's it. I've blown it. This is not going to happen, and I forgot about it. And then the clerking professions are a rumour mill. And there were all sorts of people apparently had got the job. So I thought, well, they've even been as rude not even to tell me I haven't got the job. But as far as I was concerned, that was it. And I then got a phone call in June 1980, probably, and saying they want me back for a second interview. And I thought, well, what's there to lose now? As far as I'm concerned, nothing to lose. So I went back for my second interview in a much more relaxed mode, happier perhaps, I don't know. Perhaps all these words of, I haven't got the job and everybody else has. I went for that interview. I was interviewed by the whole of Chambers, and it was only 20 strong. And I remember all these characters, not only sitting in front of me, but sitting all the way around me. I sat in the middle, asking all sorts of questions. Again, it was pre-CV, no CV. It was just about how I'd approach situations, how would I market, how would I do this, a lot of which I'd learned as a senior clerk in Lincoln's Inn. And the next morning, I got a phone call saying, you got the job, July 1980. And I started on the 1st of October 1980. The other thing is, and I don't recommend it to anybody, and I've been saying this right the way through my career, I married my junior clerk from Lincoln's Inn. So we had a relationship. She was my only junior clerk. I started dating her in November 1977, and we kept it secret from Chambers until we announced our engagement in February 1980. And there was only one member of Chambers who had a suspicion. Nobody else knew.
Wow, I'm amazed. I mean, it's such a small community.
I know. Kept it. I had a life at weekends and a life during the week. So my junior clerk, Joanne, run to court and do this, go and do that, go and do this. And then when we announced our engagement, she then went on and became a clerk in another set of chambers. And then I left. And so when I got senior clerk at Essex Court, I got congratulations from the chambers that Joanne was at, from my old chambers, from Gray's Inn chambers, because it was the big moment. The word went around the country. I thought, bloody hell, who am I? You know, I've got this job, age 26.
When you got that job, were you the youngest person to be running?
Yeah. Yeah, at the time. I was the youngest. And 26 now is just unheard of. And I look at 26-year-olds today and I think, gosh, what I had to do then, I couldn't see people of that age doing it today. I think it's just family life and the way things that maybe that I had, had to do things myself. I think going back that last year at school is a big thing for me, being deputy head boy, school swimming captain. I went from 9 years knowing nothing to running the best set of chambers in the country. In fact, it was the best set of chambers in the world. I got married to my wife in 1981. We got engaged on Valentine's Day 1980. It was a Thursday. The next year was a leap year. So Valentine's Day fell on a Saturday in 1981. So I got engaged and married on Valentine's Day. And I used to say I did that so I could save money on Valentine's cards. And we went to the US for our honeymoon. We spent a month flying around the US. I had unlimited air travel with American Airlines. And people say, how on earth did Joanne put up with this? I went to see a law firm in Los Angeles on my honeymoon. And because I came from Essex Court, and because the worldwide international reputation of Essex Court Chambers had a red carpet rolled out for me. I was then 27. And we were up in Toronto, and we did a lot of work for a shipping line called Federal Commerce, and they were in Montreal. So I said to Joanne, I just want to nip out to Montreal for today. You stay behind. I just want to nip off to Montreal. And I went off to Montreal to see Federal Commerce, to meet Bash Shetty, who was the big man there. And so that's really where it all started for me. And my first visit to Singapore was November 1981. I met many lawyers, but the first person that really made an impression on me is now a member of the Supreme Court here, Justice Lowe, Justice Quentin Lowe. And I knew Quentin Lowe. He was early 30s, I was 28, and we are very close. We've grown up together here, and that's why now I'm here in Singapore. Singapore has been a massive part of my life ever since I first came here. When I came in 1978 with my old set of chambers in Lincoln's Inn, there was an opportunity arose, and I thought I'd better grab that opportunity because I'll never go again. I come here in 1981. I've been coming here every year, sometimes twice a year ever since. And I know a lot of history about Singapore. People just mouths open because they can't believe I've seen the Singapore River, Boat Quay when it was a dump.
How did the conversation start about you coming to Singapore?
Because I'd been coming here so often, because the people that I knew, they weren't on the bench, but they were senior lawyers. The areas in which they were practicing were commercial law, construction, arbitration. It was all the talk about the Singapore International Arbitration Centre and the development there. The idea of having a dispute resolution centre, Maxwell Chambers. And I was asked, what were my thoughts? And I thought, blimey, I'm a clerk from London and I'm being asked about the development of things in Singapore. But this was 2004, 2005, 2006. And having grown up with Mark Saville, the great Johnny Vida, Toby Landau, Stuart Boyd, Martin Hunter, people in the world of arbitration and the best in the world, I knew quite a lot about it. And in international practice with the ICJ and all of that, I was at the forefront, and I was very much part of the development of international law arbitration in the UK. And they wanted my advice. And as it goes on, Maxwell started, SIAC moved to Maxwell, SIAC then grew. I knew Min, who was the chief executive of SIAC at the time. Then Chambers, Essex Court Chambers, took rooms at Maxwell. So did 20 Essex Street, so did 1 Essex Court, so did 39 Essex Street. And we were the sort of overseas sets, creating a presence at Maxwell, which Singapore were very keen on. But I always had a sort of dream I wanted to do better than that. I used to say to the Chief Justice, Sundaresh Menon, and he wasn't Chief Justice at the time. He was either attorney or he might have just been in practice. I want to be the first senior clerk in Singapore. I used to bore people with that subject. And then Toby Landau was admitted to the bar here. So that was one of the building bricks.
Wasn't
So
he the first QC to be admitted?
In the history of Singapore, yeah. And that was one of the building bricks, because suddenly there was an opportunity here because Toby was admitted to the bar and he could practice here, where up to that point, you had to be admitted on a case-by-case basis. And we had a lot of cases in Singapore, yeah, but it was always ad hoc. And a lot of my silks appeared here. So I talked to Toby about how we could build on this. And so we had lots of ideas. Another guy now, Silk, well known in Malaysia, Jern Fei, we sort of talked about these plans. And then VK Raja, who I knew on the bench and used to see a lot, and he was then Attorney General. His daughter, Mira, was doing secondment in chambers in London. She was interested in employment law at that time, and she was doing an employment secondment. She said to me in November 2016, hey, Dad's retiring. So I thought, this is an opportunity. So I was running off to Toby and to Jern Fei and saying, this is another potential building brick. So I emailed VK to say, would you be free for breakfast on the 4th of January, 2017? And which he came back and said, yeah. And we went to Raffles Hotel the day before it closed for refurb. And it was only he and I there. And I said to him, I've got this idea. And he said, no, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to do that. This law firm wants me, this, that, and everything else. And I just kept talking through breakfast. And by the end of breakfast, he says, this is a really good idea. I'm really, really attracted by this idea. And that was January 2017. And by October 2017, Chambers launched here in Singapore. And I'm regarded as the midwife. A lot of stuff was going on in the in-between the Chambers launched. And I turned up here as CEO in July 2018. I was called CEO because though lawyers knew what a clerk was, in-house clients wouldn't understand what a clerk is. A clerk is a lowly person. So I had to be called a CEO. I never liked the term CEO because there are a number of people in London who are becoming CEOs in Chambers. And I like the historical term of senior clerk because it's a history of senior clerk. Anyway, when I got off the aeroplane at the end of July from London, as I stepped onto Singapore soil, I said to myself, I am the first senior clerk in Singapore and no one can take that from me. Toby might be the first English silk to be admitted in Singapore, but I was also the first senior clerk.
And both of you were working in Singapore's first pure chambers practice.
Yeah.
What were the big challenges in establishing yourself? Like, did people understand what you were doing? Because it's so different.
No, that was, it's like London. It's London. Group of self-employed people. They were all sole practitioners in a group practice, which is what is known here. The group practice had a name, and the sole practitioners. And it's getting the message across. And we were small, we're still small, but we could do cases against each other. It's happened a little bit, but it was a little bit too small to do it. Chambers will grow. Whether or not I said Chambers will turn up here, I think it would be a good thing if they did, because they would be good to have competition. But I'm okay. I'm no longer at Duxton Hill Chambers. I've now started my own consultancy. I wanted to do this because I want to do a lot more for Singapore and not be confined by chambers. I want to mentor, guide, help, clerk. I want to help the Academy of Law. The Law Society want me to help them in the ASEAN region and talk to other presidents of law societies. I work with the Attorney General's chambers in the world of public international law with chambers in London. There's all sorts of things within Singapore, bringing work into Singapore, helping the junior bar. I've created what is known as the Young Public International Law group here, and that has gone from strength to strength in the last 12 months.
What were some of the big lessons you learned?
I sort of learned about relationships. I was lucky because I was so well known. Though I was here at Duxton Hill Chambers, I was still really seen as the senior clerk at Essex Court Chambers, London. I think how to deal with people, I think probably was the lesson. It's different to dealing with people in London. And one of the challenges were the juniors in Chambers. It's not their fault, but they've started life in a law firm. They've become partners in a law firm. They've never been in a set of chambers. They haven't started off as a pupil in a set of chambers. So they don't even understand me. They know what I did, but they don't understand me. And it was a real, and I sort of broke through to some extent, but it is quite a challenge to, just the relationship is I was trying my damnedest to work with them like I did with members of chambers in London. That was probably my biggest challenge in chambers, because they didn't understand the relationship between the clerk and the principal and other challenges that followed. Yeah.
And how do you feel that COVID impacted your work, your industry?
Do you know, it didn't really. I've missed the opportunity to go to Australia, to India, to Korea, to Malaysia in particular, and greater bonds with the friends I've got in those countries, lawyers. So I've missed out, but Zoom has helped a lot in that. But in a way, it's been to my advantage because nobody's gone anywhere. So all my friends here are always here. So I've had more time to do what I want to do, and someone's not nipping off to London, Australia or India or somewhere.
And what kind of innovations do you anticipate happening further in the legal sector?
These are personal views. I think you're going to see more boutique operations, more sole proprietors. I think you're going to see perhaps chambers models, not so much, well, not necessarily Duxton Hill chambers models. I think that you're already seeing sort of Devinder chambers, Devinder Singh chambers, Lotfi Ming chambers, which are all sort of boutique outfits. I think you're going to see more of that. In time, I think you may see that the dominant form may not be so dominant. People say that I'm partly responsible for all of this because of the creation of Duxton Hill chambers. I don't think we can underestimate what Duxton Hill chambers did in the market, because suddenly we've done it. And then suddenly you've got Devinder Singh chambers, different model. And that really interests me because I talk to a lot of people, talk to a lot of younger people, talk to them about their ambitions, what they want to do, how they want to do it. So now I've got my consultancy. If I can keep going for another 10 years, which is what I want to do. I've got two dreams. My first dream is to get Singapore on their feet, leading in a case in the International Court of Justice, which is part of my plan, and I think I can get there in the way that we've done so well so far. The other dream, and it's entirely possible, is with another pal of mine who is an English barrister, to fly ourselves to Singapore. I'd like to fly myself, and that is entirely possible. It will be in the winter, January time, but to fly myself to Singapore would be something to chalk up, and to land at Seletar and think, hey.
Is there anything that you believe in that most people don't?
I suppose really people would say, I can't, or they want to do this, but they're afraid to ask. And my motto here, and I use it an awful lot here, is if you don't ask, you don't get. And it's a cultural thing. It may be the same in Malaysia. The people, junior, are afraid to ask seniors whether they can do something. They think it's impossible. And if I talk to seniors from the other end of the scale, they would say, of course, why not? But you talk to the juniors, they don't ask. So my motto is don't ask, don't get. What's the worst can happen? Someone can say no.
Well, thank you so much, David. I normally end all of my interviews with these questions. So the first one is this: do you feel like you have found your why?
I started life wanting to be an airline pilot. So I didn't start life thinking I don't want to do anything else. But life is a book and it's a journey. The older I get, the longer I've been doing it. I do think that I was on this earth to do what I've done because of what I've created, both in London and what I'm trying to create here in Singapore. That is sort of, I had a purpose. I do think it's in a book. I know where this book is. I don't want to know the last chapter, but it's a journey. So I now do think that I've found my why, yes.
And what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind?
If I could change things here in Singapore, which I think would be to the advantage of Singapore, if I could get someone on their feet in the ICJ, that I could be remembered for that. I could be remembered for being the first senior clerk in Singapore. I've already created a legacy, perhaps in London. I'm now being credited in London for creating the international bar. People say, David, you started the bar now being recognized massively abroad. And people now say, David, that's all down to you. And I never think myself, that headline, a giant. I've never thought of myself that way. I'm quite embarrassed for those figures. When I started, there was amazing, amazing characters, the senior clerks, the great Ron Burley, the great Sybil Batchelor. And I still today do not see myself as one of those characters. I'm told I am. They were really, really amazing clerking characters. But now people say, David, you are, but I don't see myself in that way. I just carry on as I am. I do my job.
And what do you think are the most important qualities of a successful person?
Good at what they do, approachable, transparent, fair, sums it up probably, at least in my profession. Good judgment's another one.
And where can people go to find out more about what you're doing?
I will have a website one day. You know, I'm talking to website designers about building my website, but dg@davidgrief.com. They can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to speak to anybody. Anybody's got any questions, anybody wants to chat over the phone from any part of the world. I've already had this on LinkedIn from people who want to chat with me as a result of my piece in Times last week. So no one should think they can't bother me. Of course they can bother me, because they want to know something, or they want to learn, or how can they do this, or how can you do that? But that's how they can contact me. Well, thank you very much for connecting, and also an enormous thanks to GN Lee, who's in fact standing next to me at the moment. Thanks to GN for connecting us.